Hello and welcome to Geek and Speak, the Geek and Speak podcast. Don't know what episode number this is. Hi, my name is Morgan, and today I have my friend Preston. How's it going, Preston?
Hey guys, it's going pretty good tonight.
Hell yeah. We thought it would be a good time to talk about the Commander ban list. There were a couple notes of discussion that came up over the most recent episode of Upkeep and the most recent episode of End Step over on our channel. Specifically, we're talking about that was our Voltron week. Preston, you had such a good time that game. It was a totally
Yeah,
fair and balanced game of Magic the Gathering. Uh,
magic the way it was intended.
yes, as Richard Garfield intended. Uh, but we are going to go ahead and talk about the Commander ban list a little bit. We're going to jump around a little bit. We're going to spend a little bit of time just reviewing some inconsistencies with the banned list. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some cards that we think should be unbanned at this point. Maybe talk about some cards that should probably be banned. We'll just kind of see where the conversation goes. I have a decent amount on my notes here. We'll just see what we have time to get into today. Yeah. So let's go ahead and just go over a couple bullet points I have here. So this is taken from the Commander Rules Committee philosophy page, which you can find over on their website. I will link that in the description of this video. But I will go ahead and spend a couple minutes going through this, and then I'm sure I will be very winded even just by reading these bullet points. So after I read this, I'll let Preston give his feedback on that, and maybe he can point out some of the inconsistencies that he just knows off right off the bat. But here we go. Here's a couple bullet points. If you want to if you want to read the full thing, find it in the description of this video. Commander is for fun, obviously. Each game is a journey that players share, relying on social contact in which each player is considerate of the experience of everyone involved. This promotes player interaction, intergame variance, a variety of play styles, and a positive community atmosphere. At the end of an ideal Commander game, someone will have won, but participants will have had the opportunity to express themselves. Sorry, all players will have had that. The goal of the ban list is similar. It does not seek to regulate competitive play or power level. The primary focus of the list, this list of cards, is problematic because of their extreme consistency, ubiquity, and/or ability to restrict others' opportunities, causing severe resource imbalance, allow players to win out of nowhere, prevent players from contributing to the game in a meaningful way, cause other players to feel they must play certain cards even though they are also problematic. Yeah, vicious cycle. Are very different in other players who interact with, especially if doing so requires dedicated, narrow responses when deck building. Interacting poorly with multiplayer nature of the format or the specific rules of Commander, and leads to repetitive gameplay. So those are some of the things they keep a lookout for. We prefer to be conservative with what goes on or comes off of the ban list. Players often become emotionally attached to their decks, and we value their experience highly. We encourage groups to use the rules and the ban list as a baseline to optimize their own experience. The format can be broken. We believe games are more fun if you don't. So that is a brief summary of the Commander Rules Committee philosophy. And I am stumbling over my words like crazy because it is midnight because our schedules are ridiculous. So I apologize for sounding like a mumbling idiot, but I think you get my point. But Preston, right off the bat, what are some thoughts you have on some of that? What did some of that
I
sound inconsistent? Did some of that sound like What are some of
I
your thoughts?
I think that all sounded is about as good as you could possibly get a statement like that to sound. It's just how good are they at actually going about that is the kind of issue that most people tend to have. I think what they say they're at least trying to do is pretty accurate to what most people would like for the format.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, I think I agree with that. I think most of the statements that are made there are great points, and I think that should definitely be what they adhere to. But I don't think that's true. And I as far as their execution of said philosophy. So And I think that will become more apparent when Preston and I talk about some of the cards that we think should probably be on that ban list. Let's go ahead and talk about a couple other real quick points before we get into specific cards. What do you think about the idea? Because this is something I've seen a lot. What do you think about the idea of there either being no ban list for Commander or just making it more common to just say we're going to rule 0, no ban list? What do you think about that? What are some pros and some cons that you can just think of right off the bat?
I don't fully agree with that. I think having some ban list for people to sort of like have a basis of don't do this is healthy for a format. Not having anything is a little too Wild West, I think, for
Yep.
most people's enjoyment. But obviously, people should be doing healthy Rule 0 stuff regardless. But I don't think a lack of a ban list would help that in any way.
I agree.
If anything, it might just cause more issues.
I agree. I think the biggest thing for me on that point is always like, well, what do you do if you're just playing at your local game store?
Yeah.
Right. If you're just playing a pickup game with people you don't know, like if you're playing with your own group, like the same people, like our play group, right? The guys you see in Upkeep, our regular play group, the same 5 or 6 people pretty much every Sunday. We could probably implicate that. We could probably make our own ban list. And there would be very little repercussion for that. But that all of a sudden goes out the window the second we're playing with random people that we don't know. If we're either going to the local game store or playing on Spell Table or whatever.
And heaven forbid if you ever do like a tournament or something with no ban list, that sounds awful.
That does sound awful because someone's gonna pull up with their power 9, and it's just the game's gonna go over real quick with all that stupid fast mana. So I'm not for that philosophy. I do not think that no ban list is the solution. I think we need to have a ban list, not necessarily even just for power, but just on the idea that you should be able to go play a game with anyone, anywhere in the world, and have a decent idea on what you're walking into. Every other format has a ban list. Even Vintage has at least a restricted list, like even though they don't technically have a ban list. So I don't know. I just think that's something that, so we won't cover that anymore. That's our 2 cents on that. We agree that there needs to be a ban list. And Rule 0 discussion is always helpful. It's always good. But there needs to be a ban list just for the sake of the rest of the world. Then the next quick hitter I want to hit at is what do you think about the idea of having a separate ban list for CEDH in normal Commander? For those of you who don't know, CEDH being like competitive Commander. So this is like, what if you were at a normal table and someone was like, this deck is a 9 or this deck is a 10, and I'm going to win within the first few turns of the game. That's CEDH. So what do you think about the idea of having separate ban lists for those 2 formats?
Yeah, it absolutely should, because you're trying to do 2 entirely different things between CDH and regular EDH. Like EDH is meant to last a while. Like that's the point of the format, really.
Mm-hmm.
So to have one person like come up to a table, be like, "Oh, here's my deck that tries to win on turn 1," it just feels weird to have it all try to fit together in one format. So having 2 separate lists, I think, would just make everyone happier in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also like, I think power creep has been so extravagant in the last few years because they've spent so much time designing cards specifically for Commander instead of just designing for Standard. And then people are like, oh, that would be cool in Commander. So I don't even think that I don't think that Commander is necessarily like the battle cruiser Magic anymore, where you have a place to play your 7 and 8 drop creatures that are just goofy and fun. I don't even think that's necessarily true, but that is like, if you don't play it in Commander, where else are you going to play it? And we'll talk a little bit more about specific cards here in a little bit, but I'm on the same page with Preston. I think competitive commander and normal commander should probably have different ban lists. And later on, when we get to specific cards, we'll have some examples as to why we think that is. So the last, I think this is probably going to be the last quick hitter I have before we get into specific cards. What do you think about hybrid mana? So hybrid mana, I'll have an example of it show up on the screen. The idea for limited, standard, every format in the world, hybrid mana was designed so that if you have the Golgari, whatever mana symbol, that you could play it in a black deck or a green deck, but it doesn't have to be both. But because of how the color identity system works in Commander, that doesn't work. Your deck has to have both of those colors in order for you to play those cards. So to me, I realize that there's only a handful of cards where you would even care to do this, if we're being honest. There's only a handful of situations where that's probably even worth having this argument. But just for the sake of consistency, in every other format, that's how hybrid mana works. So to me, the fact that it doesn't work that way in Commander is pretty goofy. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I know why the rules committee has it set up the way they do now. It's to try to make like building your deck less confusing for people. But I think we're well beyond the stage of that being something we can even manage at this point with how many different weird things there are in Magic. I think it would just be better to work with all the other formats with how they handle hybrid mana.
Yeah. Well, even like so my friend Sean, who was in episode 2 of Upkeep, he had a deck where this was probably 2 years ago. We were playing a game and he did that cardinal sin of having a hybrid mana card in a deck that it technically couldn't run it. Like, I don't remember what the exact situation was. I think he had like the Simic hybrid mana in a Gruul deck or something like that. So logically speaking, he should have been able to play that. But that's just such a silly rule that is so easy to overlook because that's how it works in literally all other formats except for Commander. So I think just for consistency's sake, they should change that. Oh, I do have one other quick hitter. Preston, Commander is supposed to be the casual and fun format. But we can agree that fun is subjective, right? There's no such thing as like no two people will have the exact same opinion on what fun means, right?
For the most part, I'd say. I think there's maybe a couple of things where most people would be like, I think that's just not fun. Or most people would be like, I think that's pretty fun. But for the most part, most things are pretty subjective.
So why is land destruction so frowned upon?
If it's targeted land destruction, we should get better at being like, that's fine. Mass land destruction just makes games last longer. Very rarely does that actually win a game.
So we'll use that as like the kind of buffer in between the hot top, the single topics into the specific cards. We'll use this as the barrier in between those two stages of the podcast. But so if that's the case, Sylvan Primordial and Sundering Titan, they are banned in Commander. Should they be unbanned for the sake of land destruction? And if not, does that mean we should ban cards like Armageddon or Jockelhops?
Sylvan Primordial was actually one I thought should be unbanned. Like, that was on my list of ones I think should be unbanned.
Okay.
Yeah, like what costs 7, I think.
But it's green, which is the ramp color. So, so I think. So, are you kind of in the camp that like, if we're gonna let some land destruction in, we should just let it all in, or for the most part, like if you wanted to build a land destruction deck, you should be allowed to build that deck? Or is that too unfun for the format? And at that point, who are we to gatekeep that?
I don't think that should be banned at all. I think that's definitely more of a rule 0 kind of banning.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you need to worry about that power level wise, because it's not the strongest thing in the world, really.
No, it's objectively wrong to do that. Like, if you're doing mass land destruction, you're going to have a hard time staying in the game yourself.
Someone could figure out a way to do it, I'm sure.
Well, the correct way to do it is you play a bunch of mana rocks, right? You play a bunch of mana rocks, and
Or
then you get
treasure
rid of
generation.
you get Smothering Tithe out in play, and then you wipe all the lands, something like that.
So there are ways you can make that strong, but I think for the most part, people will just build sort of a memey jerk deck, play it a couple of times, be like, all right, I had my fun, I'll get rid of it. And I just don't think it'd be that big of an issue to need to be banned or anything.
Yeah, I think people need to get over the land destruction. If I'm being honest, I don't think it's actually that bad, and it is probably just a rule zero kind of conversation because we talked about this in the most recent episode of End Step that came out on Friday. But like Preston's Light Pause deck that he played in episode 6 of Upkeep is incredibly strong, as demonstrated in that game. That is not a deck that we want to play against very often because it wins so fast, it is so strong. It leads to very repetitive, unfun game patterns. But Preston enjoys the deck. Otherwise, he wouldn't keep it together.
Yeah.
If it wasn't fun to him, he wouldn't still have the deck. So us as his friends should want him to enjoy the game just as much as everyone else. So we have to let him play it sometimes. But then there's this social understanding that Preston is like, okay, I get to play it sometimes, but I can't play it out. I can't pull it out every week where we play.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and spend a little bit of time talking about your first card, the Sylvan Primordial? Why don't you spend a little bit of time? First off, if you could just read it to the people, and then defend why you think it should be unbanned.
All right, here we go. All right, Sylvan Primordial. It's a 6/8 creature avatar for 5 and 2 green with reach. When it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, destroy a target non-creature permanent that player controls. For each permanent destroyed this way, you search your library for a forest card and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So yeah, I just don't think that's such an overwhelming effect that you really need to ban it. Like, it's a good card in Commander, casual Commander, but it costs 7. It's a creature, so like once it's on the battlefield, it's just kind of meh. And like there's the whole like bouncing creatures and putting them back into play, but that's more of like a blue and white thing. So I don't think that's really a huge issue for a green creature to have to worry about super regularly. And I think that's just cards that can have some answer removal is better for the format, having a few of those around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the reason, and we'll link the ban list in the description as well if you want to go see like exact cards that are all banned. And I think if you go to the rules committee website as well, you can probably get full descriptions as to why each card is banned. My guess as to why Sylvan Primordial is banned is because it is in the ramp colors, so getting to 7 mana is not actually that hard. On top of the fact that it's an enter the battlefield effect, so it's very flickerable. And a lot of the flicker decks have green. They're like, I think the most common blink deck is Bant, so green, white, blue. So I think that's the issue. I think that's, and because it's any permanent that can hit land, so that's going back to the land destruction that we were just talking about. I think that's probably the reason is because you could get to a point where you can flicker this enough, blink it enough to where you lock your opponents out of the game. But wouldn't you just call that a win con? Like if you can lock your opponents out of the game to where you're the only person who's going to be able to get advantage, and you worked for it, right? I mean, there are other cards in this game that you get to 7-8 mana, you win the game. So what's the difference here? It's like I cast a 7 mana creature, and then I also have to have the other setup to flicker it. Couldn't that just count as a win con? Why does this have to be banned?
Yeah, there are 1,000 things at least in Commander that are better at 7 mana that aren't banned.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and read one card that I think should be unbanned, and then before we go farther into our list, I'll go ahead and read the couple that we had from the community that they wanted us to talk about. So this goes back to the EDH and CEDH having separate ban lists. So there is a card called Flash. Flash is for 1 and a blue. It's an instant that reads, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you do, sacrifice it unless its mana cost, unless you pay its mana cost reduced by up to 2. So the reason this got banned is because there's this really convoluted combo you can play with the whole creature. I'll have a couple up on screen because I don't remember what it's called. There's a really convoluted combo that you can play where you flash that creature in on turn, potentially 1 or 2 because of flash. And then you get to grab all these creatures and create this really convoluted loop that wins you the game on turn 1 or 2. That's the reason it's banned. Here's the thing. That's a CEDH thing. No one in casual Commander is doing that. One, because it's complicated. It is so complicated because you have to have these 2 exact cards in your starting hand. And then you also have to know exactly which cards you're grabbing in which order. And it's a really convoluted loop. So no one's doing that in casual Commander. And it felt like the Command Zone did a podcast about it when Flash got banned. And it kind of seemed like the community was feeling like that the CEDH crowd had bullied the rules committee into getting Flash banned. Because you could have looked over on EDH Rec, which granted, EDH Rec is not the gospel, all right? It is not something that we should be taking literally, but the data would suggest that very few people outside of CEDH were playing Flash. So the fact that it is now banned just seems wrong. Do you have any other input on that, or does that make perfect sense? That that's a great example that EDH and CEDH should have separate ban lists.
Yeah, no, that sounds fine to me. It's not a card I'd probably ever play anywhere because, it is a CEDH card, so I'm not too worried about it being here or not being here, but I can definitely see why CEDH would want it banned and why regular EDH just really wouldn't care either way. Most of us.
Yeah. All right, so I have 3 cards here that are given to us from the community. So if you want to have any input on a lot of our videos, honestly, at this point, but primarily anytime we do a Q&A, if we have a podcast topic, if you want to give feedback, we will be doing community posts when we have these questions on YouTube. And you can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we will have opportunities for you to post and give suggestions here. So these are, I have 2 cards that were suggested to get unbanned and 1 card that people want banned. So first one for unban, I don't know if I agree with this one, but we'll have a conversation about this. This is Lutri, the Spell Chaser. So for 1, Is It? It's a 3/2 elemental otter legendary creature. It has companion with each non-land card in your starting deck has a different name, flash, and when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new target for the copy. So the reason this card was banned, it was actually preemptively banned before this card came out in Ikoria. It was banned before Ikoria officially dropped because the way that companion works, this would just be an auto include in any deck that had red and blue in it because of just how companion works. So this card would get crazy expensive. It would be an auto include, and that is not healthy for the format. We've talked about before that we don't like it's okay that some staples exist, but the more staples you have in a format, the less creativity you have to express yourself. And Lutri would have been making that even worse. So that's why Lutri was banned. But if we're being objective, from a power perspective, what do you think about Lutri?
This is actually a card I had on the potential unbanned list of mine.
Really?
And I said so it should be if we do the thing of bringing back the splitting up the ban list into 99 commander and then probably adding a companion one. Because this would be fine in the 99 of decks. It'd be fine as a commander. Just don't let it be a companion.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before that I think probably everyone on our play group is of the opinion that companion was kind of a mistake. It's cool from a deck building perspective, especially for constructed. But even there, like I think about Loris. Loris broke so many formats, had to get banned in so many formats, and other companions too were just as problematic. So a companion was a mistake, and it probably should just be that all of these cards are probably banned from all formats. But if we put
But
companion
they're all
aside,
really cool cards, mostly. At
yeah.
least most of them.
But that's the
Just
thing
not
is
as
if we
a free card you can always have.
yeah,
That's the
and
problem.
even with the nerf of like, oh, now you can't just cast it from your sideboard. Now it's you pay 3 mana to put into your hand, and then you have to cast it again. Even that didn't really fix it. That
That's
nerf
still not
didn't
that
fix the
much.
problem. Yeah. So the person who suggested this is what if we just straight up got rid of companion in commander? So then your only option was to play it in the 99.
Yeah, because then
Because
also companion lets you have a 101 card deck, which just doesn't make sense.
no, especially based on the rules of companion, it's supposed to be a slot in your sideboard. You have a 15 card sideboard in constructed formats. This is one of those cards. So it's supposed to be like a somewhat of a downside, and then it's a downside also in it very much restricts your play pattern for how you build your deck. Why the hell would Commander bend to the will of those other formats? Commander doesn't get a sideboard.
Yeah,
So companion doesn't make sense.
Yeah, every other card that cares about your sideboard doesn't work in Commander. There's like 20 colorless cards at this point that just don't work in Commander from the past couple sets because they want to grab something out of the sideboard.
Yep. Yeah.
But companion, go ahead.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. So
Yeah.
So is your suggestion that if we just said that companion doesn't work in Commander, and then we could just unban it because then it could still be in your it could be your commander, or would it be too strong as a commander?
Yeah, no, I think this would be a cool, powerful, different take on the typical spellslinger commander.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be strong, but I don't think it'd be too powerful.
No. And a lot of those is that spellslinger decks are already really strong to begin with. We'll come back to this topic because there's something else I wanted to say about specific commanders on the commander ban list. But let's go ahead and get to these other two cards that were recommended to us by the community. So the next one is Coalition Victory. So for 3 in Wooburg, it is a sorcery that says you win the game if you control a land of each basic land type and a creature of each color. The reason that this is banned is because it's supposedly easy to do. There's enough dual lands and tri lands, especially with the triomes now, that have the land types. You can get that out. And then if you have a 5-color commander, assuming it has Wooburg and the cost, you cast this 8-mana sorcery and you just win the game out of nowhere. But let's be real, you actually have to work for that. And there are enough other 8-mana cards that win you the game that are easier to cast than Coalition Victory. So the argument I've heard is that Coalition Victory stays banned because it is like no one would still play it. So what's the point in unbanning it? But like, what if some kid who's just trying to get into Magic finds this at a garage sale? Because I mean, I'm sure it's like a bulk rare, right? Like no one's actually playing this stupid card. Why can't this kid play this card?
Yeah, this was one of the cards I also had for the unban, one of the ones I thought should be. And I actually specifically remember when I was first getting into Commander, looking up the term win the game, seeing this card and be like, oh, that's really cool. But then I saw that it was banned and be like, oh man, that kind of sucks. Because this isn't easy to win with.
No, it's not easy to win with.
Almost every single other win the game card in Magic is probably better than this, if not at least like 90% of them.
Yeah, I agree.
And it only goes in 5-color decks. And 5-color decks are kind of known for not ending the game. They kind of just tend to be good stuff tribal that have a hard time winning. Here's a cool win victory for those decks.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, you have to work for it. It's not like you just, boom, I cast a spell on turn 2 and I win the game. I mean, even if you have like all of the triomes and all of the shock lands and all that, and your commander is really Wooburg and not like Kenrith, where it's technically only a white creature. Yeah, I mean,
so it costs 8.
Yeah, I mean, Whatever, dude. So the last community requested card that we talk about is actually a card that's not even out yet. This is a card that people want banned, and I've seen this a lot. And actually, I saw an article that was written by Sheldon, who is the head of the rules committee. He wrote an article talking about that they're going to be keeping an eye on this card for the first half of 2023 because they think it's probably going to have to be banned. This is the card that Josh Lee Kwai played on the newest episode of Game Nights. This is Elish Norn, Mother of Machines. For 4 and a white, it's a Phyrexian Praetor, 4/7 with Vigilance. If a permanent enters the battlefield, causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. And then also permanents entering the battlefield don't cause abilities of permanents your opponents control to trigger. So you are panharmoniconing yourself and then just nuking all the enter the battlefield effects of your opponents. And the reason that's so problematic is because if you look at all of the most played creatures and stuff, not even just other cards, just creatures in general, in Commander, almost all of the top creatures all have entered the battlefield effects. Because, I mean, part of that's power creep, part of that's a problem that we've sped up the format, but we have to play these creatures now that they have immediate impact on the board. And Elish Norn's just like, well, how about no? So they're already talking about banning this card, even though it's not even out yet. And the community's pretty behind it. The community's like, this is bad. And on one hand, I get it. On the other hand, it's pretty cool. So, like, if this is just a tax piece, like, what's there's nothing we could do about it now. But if this was not legendary and it was just in the 99 of a tax deck or a control deck, I mean, people would be like, dang, that's pretty cool. And no one would be angry about it and calling for it to be banned. But what do you think about the new Elish Norn?
I think people are overhyping it to an extent. I probably would agree with the ban just because it does shut down so many commanders.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's one of those cards that just kind of, oh, here's me automatically turning your deck off. So I do think in Commander it should be banned, but I don't think it's that good in other formats, if I'm being honest. It's probably the weakest Praetor ever for other formats.
Yeah. I mean, this is a Commander card. It's only good in Commander, but I agree that they're probably taking the right approach. I don't want them to ban it outright like they did with Lutri, because Lutri, I understand the argument pretty well. And honestly, I understand the argument for Elish Norn as well, but I don't want them to ban it outright. I'd rather, because here's the thing is like, I think the community knows the potential of this card. I think they are going to be like, oh, yikes, and then just not play it. Or like if someone in their play group plays it, then they're going to ask them not to pull it out all that often. So I think we're going to end up self-regulating it enough that we can probably keep it from having to be banned, which would be nice because I'm all for having a short ban list. I don't want a long ban list.
My only thing about waiting is that the cheapest copy of this card is $50. So if you do build it and it gets banned later, that's going to suck.
We're also a month away from the release for Phyrexia All Will Be One, though.
And prices are always higher than they actually stay. I know that, but
with the exception of Shieldred. Shieldred was like pre-ordered for like $18, and now it's like $60. And I regret not buying it. I was like, oh, it's gonna go down. It's gonna go down like everything else. It didn't. And I regret not buying it. So we've actually ended up talking a decent amount about some cards that we want unbanned. Let's spend some time talking about some cards that we want banned. Preston, why don't you start us off? What's a card or group of cards that you think should be banned?
All right. So I have two for sure bans. And then there's some on my unbanned list where either ban one card or unban another. We'll talk about those later. But for my ban list, I have Draenith Magistrate, just because it's the most non-commander card ever printed. Ever.
But it's so funny.
But it should be banned. I don't care if CDH wants it unbanned, but it should be banned in regular.
But it dies
Commander.
to lightning bolt.
I don't care. Specifically because almost every single commander list that is ever built, your commander is typically one of the key things your deck needs. Your commander is either your card draw, your removal, your land, something. Your commander is usually what you use to do one of the things a deck needs to do. Almost every deck is like that. So any deck that is the commander is your sort of answer for things gets blown out by this card and can't do anything.
So
Like Zakama.
right.
Like,
Well,
like you're not running kill spells in Zakama usually.
So I agree
Maybe
with
a
you.
couple.
I mean, I'm the sinner who runs Draenith Magistrate anyways, even though I know it's problematic. But the main argument I hear for protecting Draenith Magistrate, and I don't know if I necessarily agree, I kind of do, but one of the main argument in defense of it is that it encourages people to play or build better decks, run more removal, run more board wipes, run more targeted removal, also having a backup plan, because we've had games before where you're all in on your commander and then someone kills your commander. Okay, well, I'll recast my commander. Okay, they answer it again. Okay, well, now my commander's 9 mana. What am I going to do? Like, you can't keep up with that pace, right? So the idea with Draenith Magistrate is it encourages you to build better so that you have a backup plan, so that your commander is encouraging your play pattern, but it's not the backbone of your play pattern. Does that make sense? Is that a valid argument? Because I think it kind of is, but
that would be valid if Draenith Magistrate cost like 6 mana, but it costs what, 3?
2.
Oh yeah, 2. So yeah, no,
It's
not
one
a
and a
valid
white.
argument.
Yeah, it's amazing card. So what's another one that you want banned?
The other one is for it's especially important for having the regular and CDH having different ban list, and that's just all the fast mana.
So what all falls in that category?
So all of the mana rocks where you pay this much mana and then you get more back. So obviously the big one is Soul Ring, and then Mana Crypt,
Mana
and then all the other
Vault, Mana Vault,
Mana Vault. Yeah. There's other ones I just don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but all of those should probably be banned in regular Commander. I can maybe accept Soul Ring, but the rest of them for sure should be out of the format. I think. CDH, they can have it. I don't care.
Well, yeah, it's that's a great point that it should be in the. That's another great example of CEDH and normal EDH should have different ban lists, is because fast mana is so important to CEDH, whereas in normal Commander, it's game breaking. It warps the game in just exponential ways. And also, like, Soul Ring is like $1, right? It's like $1.50 or something. It's a cheap card. No one cares. Everyone's going to play it anyways. Almost every deck plays it.
But then what about pre-con?
Yeah, but then, well, not the 5-color one from Dominaria United.
Well, that one makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's not like it goes in every deck, but even then, like, the other fast mana becomes pay to win. Mana Vault, Mana Crypt. These are Mana Crypt's really expensive. Mana Vault's like $40, $50, and that's the cheapest it's been in a long time. The other card that I think falls in this category that I don't think is like obviously in the same category is Dockside Extortionist, because it's 2 mana and it's probably going to give you 20 mana. Maybe not 20, but I mean, it's definitely like a net positive in mana. You're getting more mana than you spent on it. And it's also like a $60, $70 card. So like if you go outside of Soul Ring, then all of a sudden it's pay to win. And I don't think we should ban cards based on their price, but it's something that we should keep in mind. Like if we're going to have staples and formats, we need to keep the staples affordable, right? Like it's okay to have expensive cards. It's okay to have collectible cards, but if you're going to have cards that are objectively speaking, your deck is more optimal if you play those cards, we need to keep those affordable. And the fact that Dockside Extortionist should go in almost every red deck and it's $70 is ridiculous. But I think Dockside Extortionist is another card that, like in CEDH, maybe it's okay. In normal Commander, I hate it.
The only thing about Dockside is you can whiff with it. You don't whiff with any of the other mana rocks.
That's true. I mean, you are sometimes
you're guaranteed
like
that mana.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it's possible that someone Vandal blasts and then your only card in hand is Dockside, and it's like, well, I might as well have a blocker. So I mean, I'm sure that happens sometimes, but like that's not
and it's actually pretty weak in lower power level play groups because there's not as many artifacts running around.
Yeah, but I mean, it's pretty. I mean, it doesn't really happen on Upkeep because on Upkeep we have Theme Week so much, but in just a normal game of Commander, there's usually an artifact deck at the table.
Yeah.
And it's like if that player knows you're playing Dockside in your deck, it's like, is he not going to play out his cards? No, he's going to play out his cards, and you're just going to feed into the Dockside Extortion. You're just going to hope they don't have it. So that I think falls in the same category. Were there any other cards that you thought should probably be banned?
Those were the only ones I said for sure should be banned. And then I have cards where either this card should be banned or another card should get unbanned. And I have a couple that fall into that category.
Well, why don't you lead us through that before I talk about a couple cards that I think should maybe be banned?
All right. So the biggest one that people are going to know is Tolarian Academy. Either that needs to get unbanned or Gaia's Kratos should be banned. I know it's a little better, but either way, they should either both be here or neither should be here. They're both like hundreds of dollars.
So what do you think about maybe just banning cards that are on the reserved list? Because that's another example of like pay to win. Because like not every card on the reserved list is expensive, but a lot of them are, and some of them are like borderline staples. Some of them straight up are staples, like Gaia's Cradle. So do you just think that maybe we should just not allow? And a lot of the reserved list is banned because they're strong cards. Do you just think from pay to win and power perspective that maybe we should just get rid of, like, maybe we should just ban all cards that are on the reserved list, or do you think that's taking it too far?
Yeah, totally. I think that would just be a good, healthy idea. Like how we got rid of all the anti cards, just like here's a collection of cards that all fit into a certain formula. We just ban them all. I think that's a good idea. And you don't have to remember a huge list. You could just click on it and be like, okay, there you go.
Yeah. And that's a hard one for me to deal with because I am pro having a small ban list. But and that would obviously make the ban list quite a bit bigger without some other unbannings. But at the same time, it's like if you have these reserve list cards, you probably are an old school player anyway, so maybe you're not that interested in Commander. Maybe you're wanting to play Legacy or Vintage or something. So I don't know, man. And here's
even
the other
if you're
thing,
interested in Commander, your friends are probably also old players interested in Commander. You can just rule 0, let them stay anyways.
Right. Yeah. But what about this twist on it? What if most people at this point are okay with proxies in Commander? But here's the thing: if one person in a play group starts proxying powerful reserved list cards, that person's decks are going to shortly and at least more consistently be the stronger decks. Everyone else is going to have to start doing that. So basically, your play group is warping its play pattern around these ridiculously powerful cards, and that doesn't sound healthy.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. You've actually, for the most part, hit just about everything that I cared to hit. My only other one that I really wanted to hit, I'll have two. They'll be quick because my main things were the fast mana and the reserve list stuff, and you already hit on that. So the other two I have are pretty quick. So one, Cyclonic Rift. So for those of you who somehow don't know what the hell Cyclonic Rift is, it's an instant for 1 and a blue that says return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand, but has an overload cost for 6 and a blue. So then you return all of the non-land cards you don't control to their owner's hand. So basically, you hold up that mana, you wait till it's about to be your turn again, you bounce everything that your opponents own, and you win the game. If that's how Cyclonic Rift was always played, I wouldn't care. But there's a lot of times where people do that, and it just makes the game last another hour. And that is not fun. And also, for some reason, that feels way worse than a normal board wipe. And I don't know why that is.
Because that person keeps their stuff. That's the reason.
Yeah, but for the same amount of mana, you can play like Ingarok's Wake or Ruinous Ultimatum or something, you know,
those are both sorceries.
Oh, sure. But I don't know. I mean, do you think Cyclonic Rift should be banned just from an unfun perspective, or am I being dramatic?
The only problem with that is like the next best blue board wipe is like a C tier in comparison.
Hmm.
So you kind of cripple any mono blue decks whenever you do that, which is
Yeah,
like the one thing I kind of feel bad about. If they give blue a few better board wipe options, yeah, I'd be fine with them banning Cyclonic Rift. But right now, I just don't think blue has enough options that are good
that's fair.
to do that.
That's fair.
And keep in mind, I have hated that card for years. Maybe in the past like 6 months or so, I've come around on it in decks, but before that, I always hated it.
Yeah. Well, and I'm big on deck diversity as well. And if I'm being honest, mono blue, if you build it right, is obviously very strong. But just from a power perspective of all the color combinations or the monocolor decks, mono blue actually struggles quite a bit. It has a harder time ramping. It doesn't have the best removal. It doesn't have good board wipe. So maybe we need to let Cyclonic Rift stay around. So the only other ban I was considering are broad tutors. Broad tutors need to go. Specific tutors are okay. So like Green's main way of ramping is ramp and growth, cultivate, Kodama's reach. Search your library for a very specific thing.
Yeah.
Or there's cards in blue that are like, when this creature enters the battlefield, find a artifact with convert mana cost 2. You know, like when you have something that's very specific, I think tutoring is okay. But if you can go find anything in your deck, so this would be Vampiric Tutor, Demonic Tutor, Grim Tutor.
At least the cheap ones for sure, I
Yeah.
think could be banned. Because there's like ones that cost like 5 mana that are tutors that I'm like, I don't care if you play that. Go ahead.
Yeah,
You paid five
I think
mana.
it's called Dark Petition or something. And then also Diabolic Tutor is a sorcery for 4 mana that does that. No one
Yeah.
plays that card because it's bad.
Yeah.
But so let's talk specifically Vampiric Tutor and Demonic Tutor, where it's literally any card for 1 mana or 2 mana, depending on which card you're talking about. That just seems unfun because part of what Commander is, what's supposed to be special about Commander is the inconsistency and the variance.
You get one card,
Yeah.
or
And
two if you're playing Commander, or three
I,
if you have Commander and a companion.
yeah. Stupid companions. I think I understand the argument is that, well, I want to make sure I always have the perfect card at the perfect time. Okay, that's a great argument, except here's the problem with that is that you're never going to actually do that. You're always going to just go get your combo piece. Yeah, you're going to get your Ashnod's Altar or something. You know, you're not actually going to like, oh, we need a board wipe right now. You're going to be like, I'll just win the game instead of you. You know,
Hey, Morgan, what all did you ever get with Rocco when you had that deck?
I'm not answering that question. I'm not answering that question. But that's why that deck's not together anymore. That's why that deck's not together anymore. Is because it was funny to do a couple times, and then I was like, oh, okay, that's enough. That's enough. So are you on board with that? Like, would you be like Vampiric Demonic Tutor? Maybe they go?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Cool.
those are probably healthy bans.
Cool. Well, so the only other topic I want to talk about today is there used to be a separate ban list for commanders. So like there'd be a ban list for your 99 and then a ban list for your commander. So maybe I don't remember what cards were all on there, but let's say Grizzlebrand as an example. Grizzlebrand is broken, all right? Grizzlebrand, maybe it's like you can have it in the 99, but you can't have it as your commander because if you have guaranteed access to it every game, it's too strong. But if it's in your 99, there's enough variance that it's controlled. That's an extreme example. I'm sure Grizzlebrand just needs to stay banned. But what do you think about the idea of bringing back banned as commanders? Because I think there'd be a couple cards we could take off the ban list, making it a shorter ban list. And the reason they got rid of it initially was because apparently it confused commander players. But let's be real. Commander is the most confusing way to play Magic, and it's somehow the most popular way to play Magic. So that's not a good argument.
I mean, we already did talk about this a bit with the Lutri talk earlier, but yeah, we should have those two separate ban lists.
Yeah. As a concept, doesn't that just make sense? Shouldn't we just bring
like
that list back?
Norn, that'd be a terrible commander for health reasons, but I don't care if you have it in the 99. It's just a stacks piece then.
Yeah, if you're just playing a stacks deck or if you're just playing a control deck, I don't care. It dies to removal. All right, it dies to everything except fatal push. Okay, it's fine, but yeah, I don't know. I don't. I'm just sad that when we started playing Magic, I started playing in summer of 2016. You probably started playing what, end of 2016, beginning of
I think
2017.
I think it took about a year, maybe half a year to a year for you guys to wear me down.
Okay, so well, by the time we started playing Magic, that wasn't a thing anymore. Like the banned as commander thing, I think was already not there. But I think it would just make the format a lot healthier, and it would probably also make it more diverse because I think I'm selfish. I actually just kind of want to play Grizzled Brandon Commander because I think it would be funny. But but I know that's probably wrong. But the main reason that came up recently was because of your Light Pause deck. Like Light Pause in the 99, no one cares. Light Pause as a commander, it's always coming down on turn 1 or 2, and someone's dying on turn 3 or 4. So it's just too consistent. And I think that would just make the format a lot healthier. Because I don't want Light Pause banned, just straight up.
Yeah.
That just doesn't seem necessary. But yeah. Well, Preston, did you have any other last notes before we called it?
I did have a few more cards.
Sure.
So one is Biorhythm. It's 6 and 2 green for a sorcery. Each player's life total becomes the number of creatures he or she controls. I don't really get why that's banned. It's 8 mana for a maybe win condition.
So
How much is Crater Hoof?
So Crater Hoof is also 8 mana, and the Crater Hoof is win the game. Well, okay,
Yeah.
so here's the thing. We keep talking about 8 mana cards that win the game. That is just true. Expropriate is at 8 or 9 mana, wins the game. And then Insurrection, 8 mana, wins the game. Biorhythm doesn't need to be banned. And I think it would have the same effect as like when they unbanned Worldfire recently. Because I think it's like the same idea. But like no one cared. No one plays that card. No one's gonna play Biorhythm if it gets unbanned. And here's the thing: if you get to 8 mana, you should just win the game. And here's the thing: it might not even win you the game. Like maybe someone just board wiped a turn ago or 2 turns ago. So like, sure, maybe you kill someone. Maybe someone has no creatures and you just kill them. But then maybe there's a token deck at the table and
Or there's someone flashes in a creature.
Yep, I agree. I don't think this should be banned.
So that was a quick one. Leovold, Emissary of Trest, black, green, blue for a 3/3 legendary elf advisor. Each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn. And then whenever a permanent you control becomes target of spell ability opponent controls, you can draw a card. I understand why that used to be banned. I don't think it's that oppressive anymore. Slowing down card draw is annoying, but I think at this point in Commander, that's not the biggest deal in the world. I think that could be pretty easily unbanned at this point.
So I think that's a great example of bringing back the banned as commander list, because I think that it just creates an unfun play pattern. And because it's a legendary creature, it can just sit in your command zone. But if it's banned as your commander, then you're not going to consistently be able to play it on turn 3, right? But if it's in your 99, then it's just like, oh, it's just a stacks piece, the same way as like that Narset Planeswalker or Notion Thief or something like that. So in that case, I agree.
One card I just thought of to be banned is that Ninja Commander, who always cost 4 because it just avoids commander tax each time. That card could probably be banned, at least as a commander.
There's a couple cards that get around commander tax, and I just think that's so stupid. That's literally breaking one of the rules of the format.
Yeah. That's just the one I know people hate the most that does it.
Yeah. Well,
because there are some other ones that are more fun, like when they have a
there's that Bant, there's that Bant Bird one that does that too, like from one of the early precons that does that. And it's like, it's dumb, but like if you're playing like Bird Tribal, go for it, Yeah. Like, I don't know.
But the last big one I wanted to talk about is either we need to ban Wilderness Reclamation or we should unban Prophet of Prooffix. And I know people are going to think that's crazy, but I have 2 reasons. One, so Prophet needs an entire second color. You have to have green and blue, not just green. And the number one problem I think most people have with Simic decks is that they're strong, but they kind of just play their turn and then just ignore the table until it's their turn again. Prophet would change that so that they actually pay attention to what's going on more often and be more reactive to the board.
Well, so I agree with that. I think that would be a good idea. But I think the real problem with Prophet of Krufix is it's just straight up better Seedborn Muse, because Seedborn Muse does the untapping thing. But then it's like, oh, well, now you can also, for the same mana, cast your creatures at instant speed. And then also, it's just people are so tired of Simic good stuff decks. Like it would just
But this would make them be more reactive and not just here, let me vomit out my turn and then not pay attention. Like so this would
but
it would technically make them a little stronger, but it would make them more interactive with the game as a whole.
Well, so I agree that it would make the game more interesting, but I don't know if I necessarily agree with unbanning Prophet of Krufix, because one of the main ways to deal with the out of control Simic player is wait for them to vomit out their hand and then board wipe. You're taking that power away by them being able to play their creatures at instant speed. They're just gonna wait.
Well, if you board wipe, Prophet is dead.
That's true. I don't know. I'm not sold on that one. But we agreed on everything else in this video, so that's okay if we have one that we don't agree on. All right. Well, I think that's going to do for this video. If there are any other cards that you think we should have discussions about for banning or unbanning, let's have that conversation in the comments below. Be civil. And yeah, we will. I want to get back into a regular rhythm with podcasts. We were good like over the summer about doing like a new one every week, and we are just terrible about doing that now. And I would like to get a new rhythm. I have a handful of other ideas. It's just a scheduling issue at this point. So hopefully we can get into another rhythm and start doing these conversations for you guys again soon. And yeah, any last thoughts, Preston?
If you guys have any ideas specifically you'd like to hear, let us know.
Yeah,
that might motivate us, give us some cool new ideas. So yeah,
sure.
Thank you guys for watching.
Absolutely. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not. Check out some of the other old episodes of the podcast if you haven't. And tune in Friday for the next episode of Upkeep. See you later.
See ya.